Good afternoon. It is March 10th, 2023, and we are well into the legislative session. My name is Richard Moore, Executive Director of Texas Community College Teachers Association. I have with me today Beeman Floyd, our registered lobbyist here in Austin, who's been keeping an eye on things. And we're at a pivotal point in the session where we're getting to the end of bill filing. And Beeman, you've been keeping an eye on things. There's been a flurry of activity the last couple of days. We'll get into that in a moment. But let's start out, just give us an update on funding. What's happening with that? What are we looking at? And what are the issues and concerns for our members?
Yeah, sure. As you know, Richard, we had been waiting for a long time for the bill to be filed. That would be the bill based on the work of the Funding Commission that we've been looking at all interim long. That bill has been filed. It is House Bill 8. We recommend that all of you get online, pull up House Bill 8 of the 88th Texas Legislature and read it. It will be really the text of our funding conversation from now until the end of the legislative session. And that bill is, by the way, we are told, scheduled for hearing on March 20th, although it has not been officially posted yet.
And it's got enormous implications for our colleges, just what the funding is based on, the sort of incentives that are built into it. Could you give us just a thumbnail of what that looks like at this point?
Sure. The main feature of the bill is that it creates a two-tier funding system for community colleges. There is a base tier, and that base tier is tuition, local property taxes, and a certain amount of state money that creates a guaranteed yield that brings colleges who can't raise enough money for their basic operations. The state would kick in money to bring them up to that level. And then there's a second tier of state funding that is much more based on the state's goals and objectives for higher education. So this would be workforce development, that kind of thing. What we don't have is any sense of the percentages of that funding yet, because the bill does not speak to how much money would be appropriated for each tier. That is at the discretion of the legislature and the appropriations process. The other thing the bill doesn't speak to is in that performance tier, they talk about something called credentials of value. And those are described, but not specifically enumerated in the bill. Those would all be determined by rule by the Commissioner of Higher Education. So right now what we're looking at is a pretty substantial bill, but it's got a lot of discretionary space in it for how we would be funded in the future as it is written right now.
And fortunately, there is space in the legislative process for our members to weigh in on this. And so now is the time to do that. Go ahead and contact your representatives. Keep an eye on things for that hearing later this month. And we'll keep you posted on how that's progressing. But don't wait to reach out to your elected officials now. Let them know that you're paying attention to it. Let them know your concerns and the impact you see it having on your institution and your community. This session, we're looking at things even beyond funding and the things that go right to the heart of the classroom, the experience of our members and their students. Beeman, what are you looking at in terms of academic freedom and tenure, right? I don't think we've ever dealt with these issues in such a blunt, direct way as we're seeing it addressed right now. What's the state of play on that?
Yeah, we have a handful, a little bit bigger than a handful of bills, I guess, that have already been filed that sort of track critical race theory and prohibitions against critical race theory in the same way for higher education, using the same kind of constraints that the legislature put on K-12 in the last legislative session. That being said, if you go and read that bill for K-12 from last session, it's kind of interesting because it never says critical race theory, and there's a lot of debate right now over whether that bill actually limits to any important degree the teaching of critical race theory. What it does do, we know, at the K-12 level, is it put a real chilling effect on the teaching of anything that might be construed as critical race theory, and that's a broad construction in the political speech now. So it has had an impact on what kids are learning in K-12, even though that is not formalized to the statute.
Now, you and I were talking with a group of attorneys at community colleges a few weeks ago, and this topic came up. And as I remember, you were making the point to those attorneys that it's important for them to get involved in these discussions, that if nothing else, the lack of clarity in the bills can create a lot of havoc on our campuses and in those attorneys' offices in particular. What are you seeing as maybe the biggest risks, threats, concerns that our members might have about this?
Well, I mean, I think the criticism that we're forwarding now to legislators is that you've got sort of vague concepts with very specific results. So you've got this sort of undefined space called critical race theory, where you have statutory language that sort of tries to get a handle on it. And this goes also for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and some of the other social spaces that we have. There's an attempt to understand or define them in statute that is not really very specific from our point of view. But then you have very specific consequences associated with teaching CRT or having a DEI program at your school, where there's causes of action, people can sue you, that kind of thing. And so we're working with the legislature now to say, look, you can't create this sort of vague notion of what a thing is and then have these kind of specific consequences associated with it. Something has to give in that equation. And that's part of the work that we're doing this legislative session. With regard to tenure, you asked that question. There is a bill, Senate Bill 1799, that requires all community colleges to go to one-year contracts. So it would outlaw multi-year contracts and tenure at the community college level. This is Senate Bill 1799 by Drew Springer. It's important. He is one of a small number of senators in the state, 31 of them, and he also serves on the Education Committee and the Higher Ed Subcommittee. And so this is a serious bill, and if you are interested in it, again, I would contact both your legislator and Senator Springer's office and express your opinion about that bill. The big thing we're really expecting, however, are the 3 bills that have been reserved by the Lieutenant Governor. This would be Senate Bills 16, 17, and 18. As of this recording, there are 5 hours left to file bills in the legislature, and we still haven't seen those bills. They are the thing that's waiting. They could be filed after the deadline if the Senate chose to suspend the rules and allow the Lieutenant Governor's designee, whichever senator is carrying those bills for leadership, to file those bills. We expect that would happen. But it's sort of interesting that of all of the priorities in the state, those 3 bills are the ones we're still waiting to see the actual text. So stay tuned, because we have to see that in the next few days or a week at the outside, and then we'll know a lot more about what we're dealing with specifically in the areas of CRT, DEI, and tenure.
Well, and we've never had this sort of direct challenge of our members' job security in terms of how their contracts can be written. And their ability to exercise their professional judgments in the classroom in terms of academic freedom. Yeah. There are also these issues, as you mentioned, around DEI, which we've seen as issues that need to be handled at the campus level, even the classroom level, and they're increasingly being pulled into state-level discussions where people want to make the decisions broadly for the whole state and not letting our institutions govern themselves on those issues and letting our communities make their own decisions. So there's an enormous amount at stake. We are hard at work here in Austin expressing the points of views of our members. Nothing replaces y'all doing that directly with your legislators. They don't care about anyone's opinion as much as yours as their constituents. So please participate in this. We're going to provide some links at the bottom of this video. You can look there to find the resolution that we passed on academic freedom, tenure, and DEI a year ago. Have a look at that and the other bills or the other links, and reach out to us if you have any questions or if you get feedback from your elected officials so that we can know what you're hearing at the local level. Thanks so much for your support of TCCTA. We'll be in touch. Thanks.
Thanks.